This happened 2 or 3 years ago, but I still think about it every now and then when I'm walking alone and no one's around. I was volunteering at a school in a rural area about 3 kilometers from my home. I didn't know how to drive, and I have an irrational fear of biking. It's a whole nother story, so I didn't mind walking home every Wednesday. I was 19 at the time, but just know that I looked at least 3 years younger. Short girl, round face, big eyes, no makeup. It was winter, it was cold, it was raining, and I had no umbrella. It's fine though, I like the rain, and I was covered from head to toe, so I still enjoyed my peaceful walk with music blasting through my earphones. But as I was walking, I saw something in my peripheral vision that I was always scared to see in a situation like this. A car slowing down, following me. I didn't know what to do. I tried not to assume the worst, and I turned to see whether that was the only car on that road or if there were potential witnesses in case something happened. Nope. Just this one car following me. No one else around as far as my eyes could see. Then, the driver lowers his window and I can see his face. Old man. Seems to take care of himself. Unfortunately, not weak-looking. Eyes fixed on me.
"Where are you going? Would you like me to take you somewhere?"
I take off one of my earphones. Huh? I had heard him because at that point I had already turned down the music to be more aware of my surroundings. Plus, despite not wanting to assume the worst, I still wanted to buy some time to think of an out. Where can I run? Can someone hear me if I scream? Can anyone else see us? Where can I get help? There was no one and nowhere to run or really hide. I was walking in this very rural area on the side of this road that had a field on one side and woods on the other. There was just one abandoned house up ahead, so I tried to reason with myself. This man is probably just concerned that I am visibly walking a long distance, right? Oh, no thanks, I'm fine, I like walking. Oh, no, I don't care about that, I just want you to get in the car. What? Maybe he's concerned because it's raining and I don't have an umbrella? No thanks. I know it's raining, but I like the rain, so I'm okay. No, I don't care. I just want you to get in the car. I'll drive you to where you need to go. Really? I'm giving this potential kidnapper 2 excuses and he doesn't take them. His intentions are becoming clearer and clearer. I can't ignore this anymore, and he never breaks eye contact, like he's analyzing my every move and reaction. I'm starting to notice that his smile is starting to become more sinister too. Is it just my fear tricking me? This whole time I'm trying to look as friendly and naive as possible, because I don't want him to realize that he can't trick me into getting into his car, and his only choice would be to use force. Remember, no one can hear me if I scream.
Listen, I just want to talk to you.
Can I? Well, okay. What is it?
No, I mean, I want to talk to you properly. Get in the car, I just want to talk to you.
That's the only moment when he breaks eye contact, and it's to slowly look at me from head to toe.
Well, you know what? How about I park a little bit further and you can join me to have a chat?
Sure, I don't know if you'll find a place to park anywhere close, but go ahead if you want, sir. I'm only walking straight anyway.
Perfect. See you there?
Yes, sir. He smiles and drives away. I wait for his car to be far enough so he can't see me, and I immediately run towards the abandoned house to hide while I make a call to my mom for her to come get me. The police wouldn't do anything since I'm not in immediate danger. We tried to call them once after some serious threats from a stalker, and they just told us to only call them if the stalker was on our property. That's also another story. I explain everything to my mom and she tells me to send her a screenshot of Google Maps with my exact location just in case something happens and to stay hidden while keeping an eye on the road to see if that man's car appears again. I'm about to end the call when I see his car drive by again. And what do I see? He's looking right at me, as if he already knew exactly where I was hiding, waving at me with a smile on his face, still with this trying very hard to seem friendly vibe. He knows I'm hiding and on a call with someone now. He knows I wasn't as naive as I pretended to be. Then, he just drives away. My mom is still on the phone with me, so I tell her what just happened and she tells me to stay calm and wait for her. We end the call. I wait. He doesn't come back again. My mom's car appears much faster than I anticipated. I get in and we go home. I still can't wrap my head around what exactly happened and what could have happened. My name is Richard and I have a 5-year-old son, Mark. Just a week ago, my son and I were in the living room when I heard the familiar sound of an ice cream truck. Before I could even react, my son started bouncing up and down, begging me to let him go get some ice cream. I gave him $5 and told him to come back with change. Now I know what you're thinking. Who lets a 5-year-old out by himself? But we live at the end of a cul-de-sac and I have a lot of trust with this kid. It took me about 5 minutes to realize that my son hadn't come back yet. I wanted to believe that he was okay, but too many red flags were going up in my head. I took a look through my window and saw the truck driving away with my son in the passenger seat. I practically ran out the front, hopped in my car, and rapidly drove out onto the road, speeding to catch up to the truck. The truck sped up as if it knew I were following it, and it did. I looked at the side mirror of the truck to see a scruffy-looking man who in no way resembled an ice cream guy. He gave me a crazed smile, flipped me off, and continued to drive. He tried to lose me, but I wouldn't let up. Then something unexpected happened. The truck stopped, the passenger door opened, and I saw my son get pushed out the door and onto the floor. Then the truck drove down the street, rounded the corner, and out of sight. I asked my son what happened, and he said that a man rolled down his window and said he could take him to his warehouse filled with ice cream for free. When the man saw he couldn't lose me, he stopped, demanded my son open the door, and then violently shoved him out. If you thought the story ended here, it doesn't. 2 days later, at about 12 p.m., I was up late working when I heard a noise coming from my office window. I got closer and got a chill up my spine when the sound turned out to be the song of an ice cream truck, and then I heard someone yell, "F you." The song stopped, and I didn't hear anything from then on. It's been about 2 weeks since then. I've reported it, but if something happens, I'll be sure to update. This happened in the summer of 2010, when I was just entering my teenage years. My family took a trip to a really nice hotel in the city. I can't really remember why we decided to take the trip, but I remember a lot of family, friends, coming with and staying in adjacent rooms. I've never asked my parents, and it's not really important to the story. Now to preface, I'm a bit of a scaredy cat and always have been. I'm a pretty skinny, fragile kid, so I get spooked pretty easily, even now. This, however, was almost definitely not me freaking myself out like I normally did. Looking back, I'm incredibly lucky I trusted my instincts. This hotel had a strange design to it. The lobby was actually on the 4th floor, not the bottom floor, which I found strange. To access the lobby, you had to use the elevator. There was no way for you to get to it from the stairs. This information would have been nice before everything happened, as you'll find out. The hotel was organized in a square shape. Every floor was lined with a balcony, and you could look down into the lobby and cafe area from your floor. Essentially, if you were walking to your room, you could be seen from anyone that was on your floor if they just stepped out of the room and looked around. I always was afraid I'd fall over the balcony and sail down 8 stories to my death, but they were high enough to a point where I wasn't too concerned for my safety. The first day or two was nice. My friends and I hung out and played cards all day, or we watched whatever was on TV. At night, we'd explore the halls of the hotel and tell each other ghost stories. It was a really fun time, even though I didn't fully understand why we were there. On the 3rd day, though, things got strange fast. I woke up to the sound of screaming coming from outside my door. Now, because of the hotel's design I mentioned, sounds from the lobby would echo all the way up to the top of the building. So when I walked outside to investigate, I immediately looked over the balcony to see what the commotion was about. I saw a girl laying on the ground, eggs and milk splattered everywhere around her. People were rushing to help her, and I heard a couple people telling each other to call 911. It seemed like the girl was unconscious. Maybe she had passed out or something. I scanned the lobby and saw that my family and a couple of my friends were in the lobby getting breakfast, all staring at the event in front of them. I decided I'd rush down to meet them to find out what had happened. The elevator was on the opposite side of the floor, so I took the stairwell located right next to my room. We were on the 7th or 8th floor, so I knew I only had to take about 4 flights down. Not a big deal. I descended for a little while, looking for the number 4 on the wall or the letter L. I passed floor 5, ready to find a door to the lobby. I took about 2 more flights of steps before realizing that there hadn't been a door for the 4th floor, nor had there been a door for the 3rd or 2nd. Now at this point I probably should have turned back, but I continued down because I was tired and didn't want to climb back up. There were some weird side hallways that went into pitch-black areas with a bunch of piping and wiring, and though I was curious to explore, I passed them by. I quickly hit the bottom floor, a dimly lit and cold room with cinder block walls and concrete floors. In front of me was a set of double doors. I hesitated at first, but I assumed that this was just another way back to the lobby, so I opened them and entered. Behind the doors was a massive warehouse-type room, probably the size of a smaller basketball stadium. The only light coming in was from the stairwell behind me, so I really wasn't able to see much. Stairs were stacked and covered in plastic wrap. Tables lined the wall, and in the distance I thought I could see boxes stacked and lined against the wall as well. It was probably the storage room for the hotel. I looked around and saw an elevator in the back of the room, so I made my way towards it. I closed the door to the stairwell and began to walk in the dim light. The room was super muggy and dusty, and it seemed like nobody had been down there in a long time. As I got closer to the elevator, I noticed it was a little bigger than the elevators in the lobby and other floors. I pressed the up button, but got no response. There was a card swiper next to the button. Must have been for employees only, I thought. I turned back towards the stairwell doors, making my way past the chairs and tables along the wall. When I got to the door, I gave it a tug. Locked, of course. This is when things started to hit me, and I realized I was stuck in the dark, dusty basement of a hotel. I didn't have a phone because my parents wouldn't let me get one until I graduated middle school, so I couldn't call anyone. Everyone likely assumed I was still asleep in the room, so I began to freak out, believing that nobody was going to look for me. I searched around the warehouse looking for other ways out. Some areas of the place were better lit than others, so I looked around in areas I could see first before starting on the darker side of the room. There was one other set of doors that I found, but it happened to be locked as well. I began to cry, scared that nobody would ever find me in this basement. I swear it felt like hours, but I think only a handful of minutes passed before I heard the door creak open. It wasn't the door from the stairwell, rather the second door I had found. A slim, middle-aged man in a lab coat came out of the doors. Now, if this was 21-year-old me seeing this man, I would be very confused as to why this guy was wearing a lab coat in a hotel. I was only 12 or 13 at the time, so I immediately was relieved at the sight of an adult who looked smart. I approached him, tears in my eyes, and he immediately looked surprised to see me, as you'd expect.
"What are you doing here?"
he yelled.
"I got lost on my way down to the lobby and I've been locked in here. Do you have a key?"
I was shaking, eager to get out of there. He didn't answer my key question, and instead he said,
"I know a way out of here. Follow me."
He began to walk towards the doors with the stairwell, and I followed, relieved that someone had finally come to save me. We approached the doors and I began to reach for the handle, but he continued walking.
"Isn't it right here?"
I asked him. I will never forget the look on his face when I said that. He looked nervous, and though it was dim, I could see sweat glistening from his forehead and behind his glasses.
"No, this way,"
he had said sternly. I continued to follow him, but I was now nervous myself. We had passed the door to the stairs and were now headed towards a darker side of the basement, away from the elevators. He looked like he had no clue where he was leading me, as he kept checking around him, almost as if he was taking in his surroundings for the first time. He turned a corner and began walking towards the boxes, a dead end. I immediately froze, realizing that something was very, very wrong. This guy had no idea where he was going, nor did he appear to work at the hotel. I said, my voice shaking, "Okay, where are we going?" He turned and said, "This way. Just follow me." I knew that there were no doors by those boxes. I checked there first, and I found out the stairwell door was locked. I want to thank whatever God is up there for gifting me with the idea I had next. I started yelling, as loud as I could. I yelled so loud I gave myself a headache. The man, irritated and plugging his ears, began yelling back at me,
"What are you doing? Be quiet!"
I continued to yell. I don't even remember how long I was yelling. Finally, the man snapped and began quickly walking towards me. I went in a full sprint towards the stairwell doors, hoping to God that they'd somehow be magically open. He didn't run after me. He walked sternly behind me, muttering things like, "Stupid little kid," and other kind compliments. I was about 5 feet from the door when somebody burst through. My savior, a hotel janitor who had heard the screams from the stairwell. He saw the situation, me and some random guy in a lab coat in the locked basement, and immediately told me to get behind him. The janitor asked me who the man was. I said I had no idea, and that he had come in through the door on the other side of the room, and I pointed to the door. The janitor quickly radioed into the desk that he had found a child in the basement, and quietly, so I couldn't hear, he said, "This man came from outside. Get security," or something like that. The man in the lab coat started trying to argue with the janitor, claiming that he simply was looking for a bathroom. The janitor clearly wasn't buying it and kept saying things like, "Wait till security gets here and talk to them about it." I was standing beside him the whole time, trying to take in what was happening, confused out of my mind. Eventually, an employee from the front desk arrived and took me back up the steps to the lobby, where I met with my family, who surprisingly had no idea I was missing. I told them the story, crying and shaking, and they hugged me tightly, thanking the employee over and over for their help. I never got to thank that janitor, though. Looking back now, I had absolutely no clue what that man was doing in the basement. I don't have any information as to what happened afterwards or who he was. I know for a fact that the incident with the girl in the lobby was unrelated. Something about low blood sugar, I guess. Not sure. I've thought about that day a lot, and the only explanation I can put together is that the door I had found in the basement led to the streets of the city, where he must have wandered in from. I have no clue what his intentions were, why he was wearing a lab coat, or why he chose to pretend to know a way out. To be frank, this could have just been a huge misunderstanding of some sort, and I just chose a really bad time to get lost. But all I know for sure is that if I hadn't screamed my lungs out, I might not have been telling the story the same way, or at all. This happened to me January 20th of 2020. I was on the way to work and was waiting for the light to turn green at an intersection so I could turn left. I was minding my own business and worried that I'd be late to work. The light turned green for people to go straight, so I had to wait for the arrow to turn green, and I started to hear screeching and crashing, so I turned my head and saw a car hit the median and was now airborne and coming straight for me. I had no idea to move, so I braced myself for impact. I was so scared that I was going to die because the driver coming at me was going super fast, way over the speed limit. When the driver hit me, he pushed me over 2 lanes onto the sidewalk. I almost hit a tree and a sign, but went in between them. All my airbags deployed, and I blacked out for a split second. The next thing I know, I couldn't see because I wear glasses and found them on my dash. I grabbed those and looked for my phone, which flew into the center console. I feel like I was burning and started screaming "ow" really loud. I started to cry because of the pain I was in. I took my seatbelt off and opened my driver's side door and got out and crawled on the ground and sat a couple of feet from my car, bawling my eyes out. I could barely move and was already hurting. I had someone come to my side and told me I was going to be okay. I grabbed my phone and called my mom and told her I was in an accident and it wasn't my fault. I was sitting at the light, not moving when I got hit. My mom asked me where I was and I couldn't even tell her. The lady next to me had to tell her. I was in so much shock I couldn't do anything but cry. The ambulance showed up within minutes to take me to the hospital. My forearm on the left was burned, bruised, and bleeding. My neck or chest area was burned from my seatbelt, and to the right side of my chest was hurting, and I was told it was already bruising. I was rushed to the ER so they could take x-rays of my bodies to make sure my arm wasn't broken nor damaged to my neck and back. They x-rayed me and did a body scan, and luckily nothing was damaged on the inside, just the outside. I am now sore and trying to heal. I can barely move, but today was better. My car is totaled, but I am still alive, and I wouldn't ask for anything more. I know this occurrence isn't outright scary like everything else, but it was terrifying to me. I could have lost my life, but I survived, and I'm thankful for everyone that happened to help me and took care of me. I'm so internally grateful for those kinds of people. The first year of middle school, a lot of things happened that I believe really shouldn't have. About a month before school started, a day before my birthday, I got my period for the first time. I know, sorry for the TMI, but it's important to the story. I had called my friend a few days afterwards to tell her. I was a bit of an early bloomer, so I was one of the first in my friend group to start. Well, later on, this particular friend of mine and I got into a fight, and her retaliation was to start a rumor about me around the school that I was pregnant and had become so from a high schooler. Throughout the day, I noticed people giving me weird looks, and I had no idea what it was about until my friends told me. I came home bawling my eyes out, and my sister knew why. Being in a small town, rumors spread like wildfire, and everyone already knew about it. This girl at the high school my sister was at told her about it, and she went off on her. This started a whole chain of events, me crying, figuring out who it was, and my mom at the principal's not leaving until they promised to do something about it. It slowly started to get better, but walking home from school, I lived nearly across the street, and it became living torture. I never learned this guy's name, but the first day he followed me around on his bike with his best friend. They circled around me, so I had to stop walking, asked me personal questions, which I'd either stay silent or say something snappy, and just a bunch of things to purposely make me uncomfortable. On the third day, he kept making certain comments about my body to the point even his friend said, "Too far, man." After that, he never had his friend with him. I just kind of broke down a few days of it happening. I was always a really shy, quiet kid. I spent most of elementary school not talking. I had no idea how to handle it, and I was scared to ask for help, because I didn't think anybody would believe me or to not take it seriously, so I simply just didn't say anything. The last day of it happening, I think, was the worst. He had a group of girls behind him, all cheering him on as he harassed me. One of them laughed and said, "You should stalk her," and he actually agreed with her. I finally had enough and I started screaming and cussing him out. He smirked and said, "Feisty, I like it." I just ran home. I was already at the halfway point. My sister was waiting for me at the front door that day with our dog, only a few months old, so she had heard the whole thing. She didn't do that often, but it seemed like perfect timing. She looked panicked and was just like, "Are you okay? Do I need to hurt somebody?" And told me I need to report that to the school. I said I was fine and it's taken care of. She was reluctant but let it go. We walked past my house and our dog jumped in front of me and started growling at him. He just chuckled, which freaked both me and my sister out. A few months before our house had gotten broken into, and because I was home alone a lot, my mom decided to get me a dog to protect me. She's a sweetheart though and lets people pet her and everything. That's why my sister would sometimes wait for me outside and let kids pet her. He's one of the only people she ever growled at. I'm really afraid that if I didn't stand up for myself or had a dog, that he would have followed up on the threat of stalking me. I only saw him around school a couple of times, once on the student news because he was on the football team and got this award. I almost started crying when I saw it. And then he went up to my lunch table because my friend asked him a question and he stared at me the entire time. The last time I saw him was the last day of school. I was getting the things out of my locker and when I walked past him, his breath hitched and he just looked at me the entire time I was in the hallway. There's a lot of reasons I hate that town, but after I graduated from 8th grade, he was the biggest reason why I didn't want to go to that high school there. I'm glad my mom accepted and we moved into the city. I've had to deal with my fair share of creeps, but he was by far the worst of all. So this was something that happened my freshman year of college. Being new to a campus that I didn't have many friends on, I began seeking out some cool people to hang out with as I had long breaks between my classes. I quickly found myself spending time with a large group of girls from a math class. We began spending time in the lounge area of my campus and made some friends through there too. To give an idea, it was a relatively smaller campus with only a few buildings, and the lounge area was quite a small room with some pool tables and seats. As the semester went on, we began making it a regular ordeal to all go to lunch or coffee at least once a week. Our lunch group quickly went from 5 people to nearly 20. Friends started bringing acquaintances, and our group grew. One kid named Spencer, who was a friend's friend, joined us regularly for coffee or lunch. One day, word got back to me that he was into me and wanted to get my number. I nicely told my friend that I wasn't interested and that I had a boyfriend, which was a lie. I thought this would deter him as he came off as a non-confrontational person. One morning, a group message was sent out by my friend Trish, who asked if we all wanted to meet up for coffee, and everyone for the most part agreed to meet. I arrived about 10 minutes early to almost everything, so I was used to being the first one there. Spencer arrived shortly after me. He sat down next to me and I exchanged a friendly "good morning" and a smile. Slowly the time passed and no one else showed up. We sat awkwardly for about 15 minutes and finally he spoke up and said, "This is a surprise date I planned." I think it's important to mention I'm pretty hot-headed and I don't like being lied to. I got up from the chair, gathered my things, and left without a word. A surprise date? Are you insane? The next couple of weeks went by without a word from Spencer. I thought that maybe he had gotten the hint that I wasn't interested. Soon, though, he started showing up at the same time that I worked out at the school gym. I didn't think much of it because our schedules were pretty similar, so like myself, I just assumed that this was the only time he had to work out. Soon it went from being there at the same time to him following me around the gym. Whatever machine I was using, he was conveniently at the one right next to me, lifting weights and just staring. I had some friends that worked the front desk of the gym, so I mentioned it to them, and they said they'd take care of it if it got out of hand. One day I was squatting at the gym, and mid-rep, he walked up, pulled my headphone down and proceeded to tell me my form was off and grab my wrist. I racked my bar and turned around angrily, telling him, "Don't touch me." He apologized and proceeded to ask me out once again. I told him I wasn't interested and had a boyfriend anyways, and of course I didn't. Once again, a couple of weeks went by and the only contact I had with Spencer was sitting at the opposite end of the table during our lunch gatherings. I thought he had finally gotten the hint. Then one day at the gym, I was walking down the hallway to the girls' locker room when he walked up behind me and put both hands on either side of the wall behind my head. He said, "I know you feel the connection I do. Why don't you let me take you out?" I quickly yelled for my friend Chris, who worked the gym's front desk. Keep in mind, Chris is a very large 6'3" and extremely fit individual, whereas Spencer's about 5'7" and not very in shape. Chris quickly walked around the corner to see what was happening and came running down the hall yelling at Spencer. He was then banned from the gym and not allowed back in. One night I got a text message from a random number stating that it's Spencer, and he wanted to apologize for what happened at the gym. I told him what he did wasn't okay and that I wasn't interested in him and I'd like for him to leave me alone from now on. He apologized again, and again I didn't hear anything else. Thinking that was the last time, I blocked his number. All was well until one day when I came home from work to a bouquet of white lilies sitting on my doorstep. Thinking that they were from my grandma, she does sweet stuff like this, I got excited to pick them up and took them inside. Then I read the letter. It was unsigned and just said, "I love watching you." I frantically started calling and texting friends, thinking this was a sick joke as they knew about how creepy Spencer had been. I got concerned answers and honest no's from every single one. I panicked, threw the flowers out, and made sure to lock my door. Later that night, I get a text from a random number that said, "You didn't enjoy your flowers? I saw you throw them away." At this point, I had had enough. I called the number and the familiar voice of Spencer was on the other line. I lost my mind quite literally. I didn't even let him get past his sickening hello before I started screaming at him. He then calmly stated if I wanted to talk to him to come outside. I looked out my window and there he was, standing right in front of my house, smiling. I called the cops and when they showed up they detained him and I got a restraining order placed on him. The cops then contacted me a couple of days later to let me know he has more than one restraining order placed for the same behavior, 10, including mine to be exact. I had late classes this semester after this and called campus police to walk me to my car every night after this because I was terrified he would show up again. Shortly after that, I moved about 300 miles away and luckily had never seen him again, other than his every so often random Instagram follow request. Ever since I was a child, I've always been told to be careful around people. My parents relentlessly told me to watch my things, never take out my phone when I'm out walking, never to wear expensive jewelry on my commute. I've always figured that they were just the kind of people who were overly cautious, and since I haven't really experienced being robbed back then, I didn't think much of what they had said. Cut to when I was in college. It was sophomore year, and for our final exam in photography class, we had to shoot Chinese New Year festivities wherever they are celebrated in the city. But of course, what better place than Chinatown itself? So, despite it being known as a place that had lots of robbers and kidnappers, when the day came, my friend, we'll call her Kim, and I went to Chinatown at noon, and with our cameras around our necks, started shooting. We decided we would stay there and cover as much as we can until the fireworks display at midnight. So for the most part, we just went around shooting and having dim sums in between, until finally people started coming down to the main plaza for the fireworks display countdown. At this point, we placed ourselves right in the middle of the crowd, ready to start shooting once the countdown gets to 0. The host of the night began talking and hyping up the crowd, and I usually don't pay attention to stuff like that, so around that time was when I noticed 3 men surrounding Kim and I. One was on my side, one was on hers, and the last one was behind us. I know this may not seem sketchy considering we're in the middle of a huge crowd, but something just felt off. So just to see if they would follow us, I slowly pulled Kim closer to the stage. They followed. But I wasn't convinced. I thought maybe I was being weird for no reason, so again, after a few minutes, I pulled Kim, who was now starting to get confused, towards the left side of the stage. Still, they followed. At this point, I was starting to get nervous and scared, so I squeezed Kim's hand, hoping she'd realize what was going on, but she didn't quite get the message. Once more, I decided to move us towards the center of the crowd, and again, they followed us. It became clear to me that they were either going to try to take our cameras or do something worse, but I didn't want to stay and find out, so I had to think fast. Luckily, around this time, the music got louder and there were more people as the countdown was about to begin. I playfully pulled Kim further down the center and whispered to her what was going on. The men weren't able to follow us since the place was packed, but I looked back to where they were and they were looking at us. I pulled Kim closer and told her, "The countdown's about to start. When the host gets to 0, duck and run towards the mall." The countdown started, and just as we discussed, when the host got to 0, we ducked and ran. As soon as the fireworks shot up, everyone looked up, jumped around, and danced to the music. It was the perfect timing to lose the 3 men. I could only imagine that they were also waiting for the countdown to end before they did what they planned to do, since everybody's attention would be elsewhere. But again, I didn't want to find out. When we got inside the mall, we stayed by the main entrance, right next to the security guard, waiting for Kim's mom to pick us up. I was still so terrified, and not a minute later, paramedics were rushing through the mall, carrying a girl who was passed out and had only one shoe on. We asked one of the people who came in after them what happened. The man said, "The girl was stabbed. 3 men were trying to take her phone and she wouldn't give it, so one of them stabbed her and took it anyway and ran." Kim and I looked at each other in shock, and we were so scared we couldn't leave the security guard's side until Kim's mom came to get us. To think that that girl could have been us still creeps me out to this day. We never did get photos of the fireworks, but I'd rather fail a class than get stabbed. I met this guy online when I was 16 through mutual friends telling me about him and how he liked me. I decided to add him and see if he was true to his word, if he actually liked me or not. It was quite weird because he accepted my friend request within seconds and sent a message just saying hey straight away. A few days go on and I decided I want to meet up with this guy. Let's call him Chris for anonymity. We met up at a shopping center close to both of us in County Meath in Ireland. We got on great and met up multiple times after that. One night he asked me to his house and I agreed. When I arrived, I almost died. His mother was snorting coke, his brother was growing marijuana, and it just smelt like burnt oil in the whole house. We went up to his room and he asked some of his friends over. They seemed pretty genuine and nice. Now a few months passed and it was coming up to Chris's birthday, so I decided to have a surprise party for him. This is when it all started to get weird. We did the whole surprise thing and he ran up to his room. We heard a huge bang and screaming. He threw a mini fridge down the stairs at me and said if I'd do something like that again, he was going to kill me. I was shocked. Everyone left and we headed to bed. I noticed smaller things happening as the weeks went by. He told me what to wear, what to eat, and when to speak. I had enough of this, so I decided to go break up with him. We met at the bus stop and it leads to a small alleyway. I told him that I didn't think we would be good for each other, etc., etc., and he became livid. He punched, kicked, and smacked me multiple times. I fell to the ground and he picked me up by my collar and pinned me against the wall and smashed a bottle and cut my neck. He smiled as he did it. Luckily, the lady from the adult shop in the alley saw everything and called the police. By the time the police got there, he ran and checked himself into a psychiatric ward so he wouldn't be arrested for his actions. To this day, it still haunts me. I'm 23 now with a son and a new boyfriend, but sometimes I still get scared that I will see him and he would actually try to finish the job. So to put this into perspective, the time that this took place, I was an 18-year-old male fresh out of high school, and I had been working at my first job. I didn't work during high school since I wanted to focus on my studies and schoolwork and also cared about getting a good night's sleep. I was working at a sportswear store and I worked in the footwear section. It was getting close to the holidays and the store had more customers flowing through trying to get gifts for their loved ones and friends. During the flow of people, I did notice one guy who stood out from the rest. He was an older gentleman who had a short, unkempt gray beard with a trucker's hat and a sportsman's jacket on and looked to be north of 300+ pounds. He was hard to miss. I didn't think much of him as I continued helping other customers find whatever footwear they needed before the man approached me. I asked if I could recommend any good boots for hunting or hiking, which I kindly did. I pointed him in the direction of the outdoor footwear and he carried on. He returned about 10 minutes later trying to strike up a conversation, talking about his hunting and hiking experiences, which I overall related to since I grew up in a hunting family and enjoyed it. The conversation seemed harmless enough, but took a weird and unexpected turn. He had asked me if I had a boyfriend, which was odd to me. I said no and that I wasn't into men, just women. He looked a little upset by this and said that his 19-year-old son had just come out as gay and was looking for a boyfriend. I'll admit I was a little creeped out by this, but tried to be polite as possible as it was store policy and wished his son luck on finding the right guy before moving on to doing my job. As the day continued, I noticed that I kept seeing this guy over and over passing by the footwear aisle like he was doing laps around the store. He would glance over and flash me a smile like he hadn't just done it 3 times before that. Soon the day came to an end and I made my way towards my truck in the parking lot. It was around 6 in the afternoon and with it being winter meant it was already pretty much dark out. Thankfully, the parking lot was well lit, which made the walks to my truck a little more comfortable. The next morning, as I was doing my own thing in the footwear section, I noticed again that I saw the man from yesterday enter the store and almost immediately make his way to the footwear section. He greeted me and asked what I could do for him. He didn't seem at all interested in buying any sort of footwear, though, and just started talking about his life and such. He said that he had gotten divorced from his wife a few years ago and his son had been living with him. After a little while, once again, asked me questions like, "Have you ever thought about getting together with a guy?" Or, "Have you ever been attracted to any sort of guy?" I kindly but almost assertively stated that I had never been into guys and am happy being straight. I even lied saying that I had a girlfriend, hoping he wouldn't ask me any more questions. What he did next, though, shocked me. He grabbed onto both of my shoulders and said that I need to explore and get out there more. That life is short and I need to try new things. I immediately felt uncomfortable by this and got him to let go of my shoulders. I said goodbye to him and went to do literally anything to get away from the guy. He just walked away without saying anything. All throughout the day, I kept noticing him, whether it was from an aisle or two over, just staring at me. When I caught his gaze, he would immediately turn away. I got bad vibes from this guy and just tried to avoid him. The rest of the day went smoothly, occasionally seeing the man, but overall just focusing on my job at hand. Soon it came to that time that I got to go home. I had stopped by the bathroom real quick as it was a 30-minute drive home and I didn't feel like holding it the whole time. I situated myself at the urinal when I heard the bathroom door open. Being that it was late, it was only me and the unknown person who were in the bathroom. As I stayed focused on myself, I did notice that the footsteps of the man stopped abruptly nearby to me as if waiting for his turn at the urinal. There were multiple urinals, which was odd. Once I was finished, I turned around and was greeted by the man from earlier, just staring at me, not moving or making any noise. Literally just staring. I was immediately creeped out by this and made my way out of the bathroom, not washing my hands, not wanting to be in the same room with this weirdo. As I made my way to the bathroom door, the man made no attempt to use the urinal or anything, just stood there staring at me as I made my way out. I did walk up to the manager and told him about the creepy man. Wanting to be on the safe side, I asked if he could walk with me to my truck as I had no clue what this guy's intentions truly were. He agreed and happily walked with me to my truck where he said his goodbyes. And that was it. I never saw that man again. He never came back to the store or anything. Just stopped coming altogether. I still work at the store, but have been placed in a new area of the store working in the apparel area. I haven't seen him since, and I'm glad. I hope I never see that creep again. This happened around 3 years ago when I was in 5th grade. I'm a quiet girl who has severe anxiety and is very gentle and not popular. I've also dealt with boys liking me, but not like this. I'm not sure that this fits into the category of true crime, but it was freaky at the time. This story is also kinda long, so bear with me. One day at recess, me and my 2 friends were talking. Someone, who I'm going to call Ben, came up to me and gave me a paper. He said Charles gave it to him to give to me. The 2 friends kept saying that I should open it. I waited till the end of recess and then opened it. It was a phone number. I got uncomfortable instantly, so I threw it in the trash. Over the next few days, Charles talked to my mom, who worked at the school part-time, more and more. My mom loved him and thought he was a great kid, which is why I never told her about anything that happened. I was scared she wouldn't believe me. He and his friends made fun of me and looked at me up and down every day. One of his friends was my best friend Jacob. Jacob told me what Charles said about me behind my back. He said Charles was naming people Pokemon. He named me Jigglypuff because when I would be older, I would have big breasts and a big butt. This made me extremely self-conscious. I wore jackets and baggy pants so they couldn't see anything. Jacob told me what he would do to me if we were alone. I don't feel comfortable repeating what he said, but I'm sure you can imagine. After weeks of mocking, name-calling, snickering, he sat next to me in music. I got stressed knowing he was right there. A few minutes later, he told me he was bringing a camera the next day to interview kids. I didn't think anything of it because my class was interviewing teachers, so I assumed he got the teacher's permission. Spoiler alert, he didn't. He asked if he could interview me. I said no over and over again, but he persisted and finally got him to be okay with the fact that I don't want to be interviewed. The next day I didn't go into school. I don't remember why, but I must have been sick. I came in the day after to the principal gathering the whole 5th grade. I had no idea what was going on. He explained a child brought in a camera and was filming kids and their private parts. I knew it was Charles. The kid said he threatened to put it in the girl's bathroom and then look at the footage. Charles got suspended for 3 days. I went home that day and cried myself to sleep because I didn't know what was happening. I was so little and not ready for anything to do with boys, and especially boys who filmed people's privates. A few weeks after that incident, a girl who I'm going to call Abby came up to me at recess and tried to show me a paper. I started crying because I knew Charles told her to show me. She got scared and backed off. One of my friends, Etta, saw I was crying and asked what happened. I told her Charles was making me uncomfortable. She told the teacher and I went inside. I went to the counselor and told her everything. She left me alone to go get Charles and Abby to say sorry. I cried harder because I didn't want to see either of them. She understood and stayed with me. She called the assistant principal and told her what happened. She got Charles and Abby and talked to them in a separate room. She told me Charles wrote a poem for me. The paper was all torn up and I never got to see what was on it. At that point, I called my mom and she picked me up. She asked why I needed to be picked up early and my counselor explained. We went home and I cried the rest of the day. I thought that would be the end of Charles. Then I started middle school. Charles' new sidekick's name is going to be Drake, and Drake liked to call me names and purr at me in class. On the 4th day of school, Drake ran up to me and pinned me against the wall. He shouted, "Did you go on a date with Charles? Are you dating Charles?" Over and over. I said in a strong voice, trying to be brave, to stop and no. It felt like he pinned me there for eternity. He finally let go and ran off, saying, "So he lied." I told my mom what happened, and she told me to keep a close eye and update her if he did anything inappropriate. I then left that school a few days later because of other unrelated reasons. 3 years later, I found out that Drake had harassed many girls in the school and apparently didn't get in trouble. I now go to a different school and sometimes keep in touch with friends, but I can't help but cry every time I find out someone has a crush on me because I get flashbacks to back then.
I'm 28 years old, and this is the first time I've thought about this incident in detail because of how traumatizing it was. I met my ex-girlfriend in California in 2010. We had both lived there our whole lives, but decided to move to Maine a couple years after we started dating. She had flown to Maine on a business trip in 2012 and fell in love with everything about it. The small towns, the scenery, and the people. She came home and convinced me to pack up our whole lives and move there. And so we did. We saved up a bunch of money and rented a huge moving truck. The plan was for me to drive the moving truck across the country while she stayed behind 3 days to finish her classes at the local community college, which were due to end at that time. I would have just waited until her classes were finished, but we decided to take advantage of an incredibly good deal that we were offered from the company who provided the moving truck. She had a car that she had to drive there anyways, while I towed my car behind the moving truck. My brother came with me on the trip, helping me drive. The drive was obviously a very long one, and when my brother and I arrived in Maine, about 4 days after we had left, we were exhausted. After unloading the truck and sleeping for about 16 hours, we decided to visit the small town of Belfast, which was about 14 miles away from my new house. We ate some seafood at a little family-owned joint, rented a scary movie, and made the drive back to the house. My new house was literally in the middle of nowhere. During the day, the view of the lake in my backyard was amazing. The woods surrounding my house were awesome, and everything was really beautiful. At night, it was a different story. The house was incredibly creepy to be in. The whole house was surrounded with windows. You could not see anything looking out those windows at night, but I'm sure that if you were standing outside, you could quite easily see in. My brother had a flight booked back to California the following day, and we woke up very early in the morning to drive to Portland, where the airport was. I eventually made it back alone and wasn't able to make any phone calls or watch any cable TV because we had no service out there yet and no cable or internet hooked up. My cell phone did not work anywhere on that property. The only thing I had was a box of DVDs. That was it. When I made it back, I decided to try out my new fishing pole that we had bought in town. I wasn't out at the lake very long, as it started to get dark in Maine very fast in the fall. I went back to the house and sat in the living room in the chair, looking out the windows at the scenery. My view was getting darker and darker. I turned on all the lights in the house and quickly became creeped out when it became pitch black outside. Imagine being in the middle of the forest in the middle of nowhere at night and looking around. You could not see your own hand if you held it right in front of your face. And when I say it was pitch black, I mean you can't see anything. We hadn't hung up any curtains or blinds yet, and I had the extremely uneasy feeling that somebody was outside the house, watching me go from room to room. I decided to hang up sheets over all the windows using thumbtacks. I sat on the couch in the living room and put in a funny movie to try and shake the unnerving feeling that I had. It did not work. I eventually realized I had to try to get some sleep, and my eyelids were becoming sore. I was getting very tired. I covered myself with blankets on the couch and turned off the TV. After a few minutes, my eyes had adjusted, and I could see around the living room very slightly. My eyes were very heavy, and I fell asleep. I woke up some time later, and it was still night, and still very dark. I reached for my bottle of Coke that I had on the ground in front of me, and took a big gulp. I set it back down and looked around the room. Now, I'm having difficulty putting these next emotions into words that I could accurately convey. My heart began to throb when I noticed a man standing in the corner of the room. I couldn't see his eyes, but he had to have been looking at me. I did nothing and said nothing, and not by choice, but because I couldn't. I was frozen. He didn't move, and it was clear that he was trying to not be seen. After a few moments, I did my best to think rationally and logically. I'm not sure that he knew that I had seen him. I had a blanket over me, which might have shrouded my face, in which he wouldn't be able to see my eyes. After about a minute of gut-wrenching fear, I somehow decided to do something, and it was the hardest thing that I've ever done. I forced myself to cough. I did it while getting up, in an effort to give him the impression that I didn't know that he was there. I slowly made it to my feet and walked across the icy cold wood flooring to the bathroom around the corner of the living room. He didn't move. I made it into the bathroom and nothing happened. I closed the bathroom door and slowly turned the lock to the upright position. Tears went down my face as I backed up into the bathtub behind me. I was staring at the door. I suddenly realized there was a small window up above the bathtub that I could most likely crawl through. I moved the shower curtain as silently as I could and reached up to the window lock. I unlocked it and tried sliding the window open to the left. The window began to squeak when I pulled it open, and I froze, hoping that the man didn't hear it. A couple seconds later, I heard a tapping on the bathroom door. It wasn't a knock, but a tap, and it didn't sound like the tap of a finger. It sounded like metal, like he was tapping a knife against the door. At this point, I made the realization that the man either knew what I was doing or simply wanted me to know that he was outside the door. Adrenaline took over completely, and I slid the window open and pushed the screen out onto the ground. I tried not to exert any noise as I jumped up and began squeezing my body through the small window. My head and upper body were out, and I could not see inside the bathroom anymore, only the dense, dark woods in front of me. I was pulling my legs through the window when I suddenly felt the man grab my foot. Directly after that, before I could even react, I felt my ankle be sliced open. I let out a noise of shock and surprise as I pulled out of his grasp and fell to the ground. I started heaving and felt as if my heart would explode. I stood up and looked around. I very quickly dashed out into the woods and fell to the ground, looking back at the house and the window to the bathroom. I felt my ankle, which was throbbing from pain, and brought my hand up to reveal it covered in slick blood. The deathly serious situation I was in became real and horrifying. I looked back at the house and suddenly saw the back door fly open. The man ran down the steps and started looking around into the darkness, searching for me. I became a statue on the ground and tried to control my breathing. He had a huge knife in his hand and was wearing all black. He was walking into the woods, but not near where I was laying. He was grunting, and soon after, I lost sight of him. I started frantically looking around, thinking that at any moment he would spot me and stab me to death. I saw nothing but trees and darkness. There was a bit of snow on the ground from a couple days before, and I was freezing and shaking at this point uncontrollably. About 10 minutes later, I saw the man walk out of the trees from where he entered and went back inside the house. I laid out there the rest of the night, and luckily, the sun started to rise only about an hour later. After the sun fully illuminated my surroundings, I felt as though the man had probably left, and I felt ready to move. I made it to my feet and walked around the house to the front. I saw that the front door was left wide open. I slowly approached it and looked inside. Nothing. I walked in a few steps and grabbed my car keys that were hanging on a hook by the front door. I ran back to my car and unlocked it, got inside, and started the engine. I backed out of the long driveway and drove to the little general store a few miles from my house. And this is where the story ends. I got away, and so did the intruder. My ankle was pretty badly cut, but it healed after a few months with no problems. I suffered minor pneumonia from being outside for the time that I had, but nothing too serious became of it. This incident has made sleep very difficult for me, but writing this has oddly enough made me somewhat drowsy. I think maybe I'll try to go to sleep right now.
Hey friends, thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe and click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, r/Let's Read Official, and give and receive feedback from the community, and maybe even hear your story featured on the next video. And join my Discord to interact with me and other listeners directly. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations for just $1 a month on Patreon, and maybe even pick up some Let's Read merch on Spreadshirt. And check out the Let's Read podcast, where you can hear all these stories in long compilation form and save huge on data, located anywhere you listen to podcasts. Links in the bio. Thanks so much, friends, and happy birthday, Lils.